Hello everyone, welcome back to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. As usual, Steve Ryder alongside me, but especially delighted to welcome Andy Holding to the show. Normally, this is the moment that we speak to our guest first of all, but considering that we've just had the Dublin Racing Festival and another great renewal of the Dublin Racing Festival, the only person on this desk who was there is Steve Ryder. Impressive. You're not showing any visual signs of wear from the weekend. How do you feel now?
Yeah, I'm okay. The voice is slightly husky, as you might then see. But no, it was really, really good atmosphere, especially on the Saturday, Galopin Des Champs. It was what exactly you wanted to see. The Sunday kind of petered off a little bit with obviously Lossiemouth falling, but the atmosphere on the whole was absolutely fantastic.
What would be the takeaways from the experience that you've had? And obviously people talk about how strong Irish racing is at the moment, how they concentrated on starting this Dublin Racing Festival some years ago, and what a great success it's proved. What are you bringing back from it and going, yeah, we could do that? Or
So particularly, we've been for the last 4 years as a group of lads, and you have seen it progress each year. I think that sometimes hindered UK racing is the lack of interest in changing, whereas as soon as you walked into the racecourse this time, there were people greeting you. Do you know where you're going? Where's the nearest bar? Here are the nearest toilets. There was a brand new block of toilets on the way in. So everything feedback-wise from the previous year, they'd done something to try and work on to improve, and they certainly did that. I think the atmosphere there it's a proper racing fan base. When Lossie fell, everyone was just concerned at the fact, is she going to get up, as opposed to, what's this done to my bet? It's a proper racing fan there.
Well, it says a lot about where racing in Ireland, certainly at the top level, going. Andy, what was your view of the weekend and the DRF in particular from afar?
I think the picture has become a lot clearer, hasn't it? Particularly in the novice races. We were going into it thinking, have we got a genuine 2 mile star? Have we got something to take on the New Line and the Turners? Is Ballyburn the real deal over distances beyond 2 miles, etc., etc.? And I think we got pretty much answered all of those criteria. Just echo what Steve says, well, just looking, I mean, I've been there quite a few times, but not so much in recent times since I've had my boy. But there just seems to be a real nice core and undercurrent of a genuine young racing fan, almost like a little bit of a football crowd kind of mentality, but that kind of LA after horses win and they get behind their horses, the stars, they go in, they're rushing in to go and see Galopin Des Champs in the Pride Ring afterwards. And I think that's kind of been lacking for many years, hasn't it? A genuine sort of love and a warmth towards the superstars. I think it's great to see, and I think it's in safe hands when you see that core, that element coming through and getting behind the sport.
There are some people who go, oh no, we want to protect, we want to keep the boorish element out of it.
Not at all.
But it looks as if they've got the balance right at the DRF, is that fair?
It was done purely out of love. There was no, do you remember, was it Cheltenham where we don't want to go home, like that chant? That's a bit football-y, but this was just pure elation, and Paul Townend then brought Galopin Des Champs after his interview back across and kind of was bringing up the crowd. Like it was done out, and then people genuinely running to the parade ring to get a glimpse of it coming back in. It was 10, 20 deep.
And I think it's okay to be like that. And I think Cheltenham is now, it's accepted. It's okay to cheer for your horse and almost give it a bit of a sing-song on the way back in. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. No. Yeah, it's good.
Well, we'll be reflecting on the racing at the Dublin Racing Festival in our racing recap. But before we close off this opening part of the show, we must mention the sad passing of one of the great supporters of National Hunt racing, particularly in Britain, John Hales, famous for owning great horses like One Man, Azertia, obviously the Grand National winner, Neptune Collonges, Politologue, amongst others. He passed away last week at the age of 85. We send our condolences to his wife, Pat, his daughter, Lisa, all family and friends. And we move into this week's racing recap, and obviously we start with the Irish Gold Cup from Leopardstown and Galopin Des Champs. It was interesting. I heard Ruby say straight after the race, he said not his best performance, but still just too good for everything else. And Factophile looked like he was going to finish second, didn't. That was disappointing. What was your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, they let him dictate, which is always a dangerous game, isn't it? Once you get a horse like that in a good rhythm, in his comfort zone, he starts to feel dominant from a long way out. And the writing was on the wall, wasn't it? Very early on, I think going past the stands, once the crowd really cheered for him and give him that boost he needed going out into the second circuit, there was an air of inevitability that he was going to stay there. Never really felt as though Factor 4 was ever going to turn the tables, even though they tried something slightly different. They dropped him out a little bit further, but I actually think that was probably even more to his detriment than anything else. I think they're probably more wise now to drop that horse back to the 2.5 miles. A trip, of course, he beat Galopin Des Champs over in the John Durkan. JP might not necessarily have a runner in the Gold Cup. He might think, well, we might as well give it a shot because he might have Spillane's Tower for the Ryanair. I mean, that's still a possibility, but I think the core feeling is that Factor 4 will probably end up in the Ryanair, like many of us thought he would beforehand. But I mean, Galopin Des Champs is just brilliant. 6 for 6 now around Leopardstown. Arguably, he's probably even better at Leopardstown than he is at Cheltenham. That's nothing to take away from his 2 Gold Cup wins, but it all looks set up for him now. It's very, very hard to see anything other result other than Galopin winning again, particularly now as last year's second's out, Jerry Colon, which is real sad news from the Gordon Elliott stable. Just don't really see an obvious challenger.
Yeah, well, he's 4-7 with Bet365 in the anti-post market. Obviously, the non-runner no bet Bet365 market's also available. He's 1-2 in that market. Factor File 7-4 for the Ryanair. Is Factor File now no longer a viable Gold Cup winner? And is it just it's going to be an exhibition for Galopin in the Gold Cup and 3 in a row?
It should be 3 in a row. He's just a different beast going left-handed. I agree with Andy. I do think he is better at Leopardstown than he is at Cheltenham, but you can't knock his Cheltenham record either. It was interesting when they set off. I thought, oh, you're not going to get an easy lead today because there was sort of four abreast going into the first couple, and then off he went. And I just thought he jumped brilliantly. The race IQ data, I think this is the best figures they've got for him jumping since they began recording, and just the wall of noise when he jumped the second last, when it looked just for a moment as if they may come to challenge, but away he went. I agree with Andy that the Factor File, I think the earplugs and a cross noseband helped him settle better, but that finishing effort coming towards the line, it would be natural for him to now drop back to the Ryanair, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to see Factor File drop back to the Ryanair for the strength of the Gold Cup, but I could understand why they'd want to do it. But I'd love to see the most realistic Gold Cup horses go for the race. Can I just ask you both about Galopin's status? I mean, obviously he's still got the Gold Cup to go to equal best mate, but he's got 2 Gold Cups, Courtauld 1-2 Gold Cups, etc. I think it's indisputable to say that he isn't one of the best chasers we've seen, one of the best day chasers. But where does he fit in? And all that argument, the last week or so, people talking about, I'm done by. I think real people who love racing appreciate Galopin Des Champs.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
I think the only thing he hasn't got on his CV, which I suppose counts against him, like the Denmans and Courtauld stars, is he hasn't been defeated badly and then come back again.
Yeah.
I think we love those horses even more,
Yeah.
like Courtauld, and you think they've gone, and then they come back and they really warm your spirit by winning again. You think, oh my God, how's he managed to win a King George at the age of 12? That kind of stuff. So I think he's a bit unfortunate on that front that he hasn't had a chance to do that.
You're too good.
He's too good. But as a horse that he's just completely dominant of all the rest in his category and has been for many years, he stands out. And I think the thing that sets him apart, Steve mentioned in the IQ jumping, is that Paul doesn't necessarily have to do anything to him. Every single fence he seems to organise himself. He's just one of those horses where you don't see Paul asking for Hail Marys, do you? He just sits there and the horse delivers every time. So that's why he's so strong at the back end of his race, because he's saved a huge amount of energy. His efficiency levels are so high that he's able to quicken away. And you look at his sort of sectionals I did from the back of the second last to the winning line. They were exactly the same as Margeborough, who was visually quickening as well. Yeah. When he won the Novice Chase, I think there was 0.1 difference between them. So he's running 2 mile speed at the end of a 3-mile race, and he was the fastest overall on the card as well, furlong per furlong. So yeah, he could basically run 2-mile speed for 3 miles, and that's what kills everything else.
Yeah. Well, what about you and his position?
I mean, he's just, an absolute legend. I love him. There's kind of an inevitability around him because he gets beaten at Punchestown, but you kind of expect him to get there because the track, the configuration, the distance won't suit. But then he gets back to Leopardstown going left-handed, and you go, well, there you go. He was just going to go and win now.
And it's quite nice when they have a go at conditions or tracks where they're not that well suited to. It's nice to see them tested and see what they've got in the tank. He's obviously got more in the tank when he gets to places like Leopardstown and indeed even at Cheltenham.
You touch on Paul Townend there, and I just think he is an unbelievable rider. And I think for a few years he was obviously coming from being the understudy to Ruby Walsh for all those years. But there was so much this weekend. There was an inevitability going towards the final fence or the final hurdle where previously you'd watch Ruby Walsh and you wouldn't be counting your money until they're over that final flight. And there was always in the crowd that kite, is he going to get over? Final Demand went clear. Absolutely no one was batting an eyelid approaching the last. He's just going to get them over. Galopin the same. Kopek de Bordes. He's just an incredible knack of letting the horse do what he wants over the final hurdle.
I mean, you don't seem, now that Steve's mentioned him, fall at the last.
No. Whereas I know later on in Ruby's career, it became a bit of a thing. Obviously after Annie Power and Benny Dedieu and a few others.
Yeah. Well, I think Corto probably didn't help with that because it was his sort of trademark to make a mistake at the last, wasn't it? So,
yeah.
I do enjoy, though, and I know people get really hung up on it, but I don't think you should do. I do enjoy the comparisons. I think it's what racing is all about. When people say, right, Corto, Denman, Best Mate, and Galopin, how would you rate them? I enjoyed that conversation. There's no right or wrong answer. But it's great to have the
debate.
Just a
subjective thing, isn't it? Everyone will have their own personal favourites for one reason or another.
That's the category he's in to talk about.
I think if you're talking weights and measures, and you go, well, he was 180 and this one's 175. Well, fair enough. But I think all those arguments are based on what the horse meant to you.
You exactly. And who's the one for you out of that? I mean, maybe I've left one out of the quartet, or should add another one to it.
I'd probably go Corto Star just because he did it for so many years and. He was able to win a 4th King George at 12 years old. I mean, is that right? Fifth. Sorry, yeah. God,
well, just
doing him there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's astonishing, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Not to mention. And to win from 2 miles up to 3 miles and 3 mile 2 in the Gold Cup, I think that stands him apart. Him and Desi, cut from the same cloth, weren't they?
You have one in that quartet that you favour?
Corto was great. I just caught the back end of his career, so I probably didn't see him right at his prime, winning his first Gold Cup. But I think Galopin's well up there, and I absolutely loved him this weekend. I think that was a real I was there moment this weekend. It
might be another one when it comes to the Gold Cup. So are you going to be there?
Oh, we're there Tuesday, probably not the Friday.
All right. Well, if he wins it, which he probably will, it'll be another one. He's a tremendous racehorse. Lots of other good racing to reflect on. And the card kicked off on Saturday with Final Demand winning. And winning in the style that really sets us up for something spectacular when he heads to the festival. But what did you make of his performance on the weekend? Yeah,
really impressive. He didn't set the standard on form achieved. I know that Limerick success was very good. But other stablemates had probably stronger pieces of form coming into it. But the vibes, as Brian Cooper on the show last week kind of said, were very, very strong. He looked like a real chaser for the future. I mean, he's going to be 20s on to be running as a novice chaser next season.
Sure.
The dreams of the Albert Bartlett were quashed straight away. Plenty pace enough to go to the Turners, and he'll be a leading contender in that for sure.
He is 9-4 with Bet365 for the Turners. The new line 3-1. Kopek the board 6s. The Yellow Clay 8s. But let's get your view on that performance from Final Demand, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, me, Sam, and Andy do the time figures for ourselves. We kind of like base the novices around what speed figure they achieve and how good they are, particularly going into Cheltenham. It's usually a benchmark of their capabilities prior, and then you think, well, they should be able to run to at least that championship standard. There's 1 or 2 horses this season, quite a few in fact, who have looked good but haven't quite achieved that. So it's quite handy having something objective to stick onto a horse and say, right, we know you've done this. And that is usually good enough to be in the first three in the turners or win it.
Yeah.
There hasn't been many that's run over a certain level, but he did Saturday. He doesn't stand out by a mile. He's only like a couple of spots clear of the likes of Cowabunga and the Yellow Clay and the Real Lion, but he does set the standard on that run. And I think the thing to highlight was how strong he hit the line. As they said from the back of the last over in Ireland. He was really, really lengthening and quick, and he was getting stronger the further the race went on. That's why one or two scribes afterwards thought immediately, oh, he could be an Albert Bartley horse.
I must admit, visually, when I watched it, that's what I was thinking.
Well, it was that in-between distance, isn't it? The 2 mile 6 there, they haven't got 2, 4 or 3. It's a 2, 6. You either decide to go back or forward, or depending on how you get on. So it's quite a good trial in some respects. But Willie almost looked puzzled, didn't he, when I think it was Nick Luck dared ask him if the Albert Bartley was a and he, no, it was always a 2.5. So yeah, he's his number one representative. But I think he's the right favourite. But I do think he's now looking quite a strong turners. That Cowabunga clocked a good number when he beat William Money and the Cocktail Brew over in I think it's Punchestown Fairy House. That's Saturday. I know Sam Turner's flagged him up on Racing TV. He's quite keen on him based on the numbers that we got. I think it's a good pick at 12-1. I'm still yet to be convinced about the Real Line.
The new line.
Sorry, the new line, I beg your pardon.
Is he the real deal? Gotcha.
Well,
see how you mixed it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got me there. He's doing everything sweetly and on the bridle at the moment, but his numbers are just slightly below the ones we've got really good.
Okay.
So I'd like to see him do what he's doing in a proper race where they've gone flat out and that cruising speed's tested. What will he find when he comes up against like a Final Demander who'll just be relentless from 2 out? A Cowabunga and the Yellow Clay has won 2 Grade 1s over 2.5 miles. He hasn't quite, for me, done it yet. Beating Wawingo and Regent Stroll, that doesn't really cut it so much for me at the moment.
Yeah. That's a fair call. And by the way, to the gentleman, I think it was a gentleman, on our YouTube comment section saying you're talking about the Dublin Racing Festival last week and we mentioned the Cheltenham Festival. Well, it's impossible to not talk about the Cheltenham Festival, I'm afraid, because most of the horses that ran the review section last week and all the horses that ran from the review section this week, the next race is going to be at the Cheltenham Festival. So it's kind of where we have to go. So apologies if it offends you, but we're kind of stuck with that. And the reason why I mentioned that is because the next race, the Spring Juvenile Hurdle, is a race that you flagged up last week, Steve, as a race that invariably is going to have a significant bearing on the Triumph Hurdle. How significant will it be, though? Hello Neighbour winning. I thought Galileo Dame ran really well under feet. In terms of Lou Lamba and East India Doc, who I know he likes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this race has given us the winner for the last 4 years. They haven't necessarily won the Spring Juvenile. The likes of Lossiemouth and Marshborough obviously then come from this race to win the Triumph Hurdle. This is exactly what you wanted to see from Hello Neighbour. Fit with the first time hood, settled better, jumped better. I thought it was a really good ride by Keith Donoghue. He tracked what he thought was the biggest danger on St Lucie with Paul Townend, and then when he quickly realised that she'd kind of pulled away her chance, nipped up the inside, took her position, and I don't think he's ever going to be a horse that's going to win by a big distance. I then went back through it. It was a short distance on his debut. I think he won by 3 lengths in a week made, and obviously on his second run on the flat, he's rated, 97 in that code. I just thought he was kind of pulling himself up in the lead, and the way that he travelled into the race and jumped into the race, I thought East India Doc is going to set it up for him on that new course. I just think that big long run between the second last and the last, up the hill, he'll get a perfect toe into it. And I thought it set up brilliantly ahead of the Cheltenham Festival. If you look at the anti-post price of 11-2 with Bet365 for the Triumph, as opposed to the 9-2 no run and no bet, I'd back him each way in that, because I do think we've got 3 standout juveniles this year, and he's the biggest price of the 3.
Yeah, Lou Lamba 6-4 with Bet365 in the anti-post market. East India Doc 11-4, Hello Neighbour 11-2, and then the mares Lady Vega Allen 16s and Galileo Dame 20s. What was your view as an East India Doc fan watching that race on the weekend?
I didn't have a sleepless night, put it that way. It's one of my favourite races of the whole festival.
The Triumph,
yeah. I'm a fully paid member of the fan club of it. I just love seeing these juveniles come through, and I think this race, more than any, based on time figures that we've had historically, is the biggest guide to what's going to win it. You very rarely get a horse that wins the Triumph that hasn't run in a strongly run race, hasn't run a number of any great significance prior to. They don't come from left field and think, oh my God, where did that come from? If you haven't run a number, you get found out because of the brutality of the race. So if you think you're on something visual that looks quite good, but it hasn't been backed up by numbers, then, like I say, I think you're in trouble. This year, the differential between what East India Dock has done, historically based on our numbers, and what the others have done in comparison, is the biggest chasm of any of the novice races, any of the novice chases, of all the novice hurdles. Arkle back in the day was the fastest juvenile we ever got. He did a 74 when he won the Triumph. There's been horses like Lossiemouth, 71, Peace and Co, 73, Ivanich Gorbachev, 69, Defi de Sceaux, 7. They've all been in and around the 70 mark when they've won the Triumph. Yep. This lad did 74 when he won the race back in November, was it?
Yep.
And then he usurped that when he won at Cheltenham the other day. He did a 75, which I didn't think he'd ever run beyond 74. I thought he's peaked, he can't do it again, and he's done it again. So we've now got 2 back-to-back 74, 75s, which is ungodly.
Okay.
Lalumba did a 61 when he won at Ascot, and Hello Neighbour's done 61 and 60. He actually ran a slower time figure in the Spring Juvenile. I don't think it was necessarily his fault, because I think the race was run in a fairly pedestrian manner. And I'm a fan of Hello Neighbour. He was actually one of my 10 to follow this season, right, as a juvenile to follow. But he's yet to really capture my attention based on times. Yeah. Whereas East India Dock is just doing something which is just saying, this is Triumph Hurdle material all over. And I've gone along. I think he should be favourite, based on what he's done on our numbers. And it's surprising that the handicapper is actually, I only copped this last night, funny enough, it was a social media feed that got passed on to me. The handicapper is actually saying that Hello Neighbour and East India Dock are roughly the same. I think 143 to 142. I'm thinking, how can they judge that race there, that Spring Juvenile, when they're all in a heap, and with a great respect to Galileo Dame and Lady Vega Allen and Willie de Hoole, I don't think they're as good as, anywhere near as good as East India Dock, or Stencil, for argument's sake, the horse that chased him home. You know, there was like big distances back. There was like 10 lengths back to Stencil, 15 lengths back to the third, 20 lengths back to the foot. They were like strung out like washing. They were absolutely punch drunk at the line at Cheltenham. That is definitely the best form going into Cheltenham. Okay. Whether he wins or not is, I have to say, up to debate, and the horses can improve. But he sets an incredibly high standard, East India Dock. You can't get a clearer argument than that for East India Dock's chances in the Triumph Hurdle. I do like Galileo Dame as a racehorse, though. She had some pretty good form on the flat. She was second to Hamish in that listed race in Ireland at the back end of last season. She's a classy horse, and I thought she looked a bit more professional. Jumped much better than she did for, I mean, obviously it was foggy the first time she ran. Oh, yeah, she was awful that day. Scruffy. Scruffy. And she made 1 or 2 little errors, and she was also held up at the back, but I like the way she finished the race. I thought at 20 to 1, when Hello Neighbour's 11 to 2, I thought she could get into a place at the festival. I just felt that was a bit of I've also been an East India Dock fan, so I will stick with him, but I thought Galileo Dame did all right. Next up, we'll talk about the Irish Arkle and Marshborough. You touched on it earlier, so I'll let you kick off with this, Andy, about his impressive performance. But obviously you mentioned about in relation to Galopin's timing. But tell me about his strength as an Arkle horse. Yeah, he's gone right up there. I mean, he started off with a good number when he won first time out. He looked polished, quick and away from 2 nice horses, Tully Hill and Asian Master. Not top class, but good, genuine Grade 3, Grade 2 horses. So you knew straight away he's a player. But he's even better, I thought, at Leopardstown. Everyone's like, you can crib his jumping. There was a couple of mistakes here, there, and everywhere. But I've actually got a bit of a theory about this, and I was wondering why those mistakes were caused. And he definitely just has a little bit of a comfort blanket tendency to edge to his left, and because the outside of the track at Leopardstown is the place to be where all the top jockeys go, the Walshes, the Townends of this world, to look for the better ground, almost like the jogger's path on the outside. That tendency, because there was no rail there, because there's a massive big wide open chasm, I think he was just doing that. But at Cheltenham, of course, when they run on the old course in the Arkle, he'll be in front on the inside, and the rail will be on the inside. So I think that'll correct his potential to just edge to his left. That's my theory. That's why I think he'll jump better at Cheltenham. I think he's a serious contender, a serious danger to Sergino. We'll see what he can do the weekend, which we'll touch upon in a second. Yeah. Likely to go for the game spirit, and it sets up for a fascinating race between the two, and they're two exceptional young horses with an abundance of talent. I mean, don't forget that Marsbury was winning a Triumph Hurdle on his second start in his career. You shouldn't be able to do that. He looks even better over fences. He's strong, he's physical, he's got a presence about him, and he's got that turn of foot, deadly turn of foot. So, I mean, I'd imagine these two, if they get there on the day, from 3 out down to 2 out.
It'll be something.
This
could be one of the races of the festival.
It goes back to was it not the old like Noddy's Ride, and back in the day there was Buckhouse, Noddy's Ride, or whatever. The real sort of big clash in the Arkle between two stellar horses.
Sergino's 8-11, bet 365 for the Arkle in the anti-post market. Majborough 5-2. L'Heure de Sud, who's also due to run this weekend, 14-1, and then 16-1 bar those. Majborough, I think he's gone up to 162 according to the Irish handicap, which is pretty significant. How did you take in that performance?
This was really impressive, really impressive. And the thing that's interesting around it, he didn't look foot perfect. I get completely where Andy's saying around if you want to jump either left or right-handed, you definitely want them jumping left-handed with the spring festivals, is how quick he was away from his fences. I think the race IQ data have him having a ridiculously high jump index, even though visually it was as if he was making mistakes. It was funny being in the crowd because there was a few oohs and ahs when he was then doing it. But then I watched it back and they were nowhere near as bad as what I thought they were actually at the time when you were on track. I suppose it's you're live, you're in the moment and you're thinking, oh. And I thought it was a very un-Mark Walsh ride. And it's going to be interesting in the Arkle what Nico de Boinville and Mark Walsh do, because this could be like Danny Mullins and Paul Townend in the Irish Champion Hurdle of, right, we're off. Who's going to make the mistake? Who's going to blink first? Because they could go a proper gallop. I'm just hoping that they don't do a Davy Russell on Petit Mouchoir and Aidan Coleman on St Calvados when they went far too fast in an Arkle, and then Ruby on footpad then came past, because these are two top class novice chasers, and this is the clash we wanted, and this is the clash we're going to get.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And we'll obviously be talking more about Sergino a little bit later on. And of course, Sergino, when he made his chasing debut at Kempton, he beat a horse called Ballyburn. And a fair few people were prepared to crab Ballyburn after that race, talking about his jumping and about where he sort of sits. And there was even talk about him going back over hurdles. It is just sort of mooted, but I don't think Connections ever even considered that. I thought it was a pretty good performance from Ballyburn on the weekend to beat Croke Park, who I think is a very good horse. And he was very strong at the line, Ballyburn. What did you think? Yeah,
Croke Park's probably got better recognition for finishing second in this than his previous 2 Grade 1 victories. I'm still a bit lukewarm on him, to be honest. I'm still not convinced really with his jumping. I thought Paul Townend was very good and wanted to teach him to settle a bit better with the view for the Brown advisories going forward. If you asked me to back either him or Dancing City for the Gold Cup for next year, I'd be backing Dancing City, because I just think that 3 mile, 2.5 furlongs will suit Dancing City better than it will Ballyburn. But the Brown advisory's 3 miles and half a furlong, and I do think that's probably still within his distance. I know he was strong at the line. Paul Townend kind of allowed him to pop the last and then ask him for his effort to go past Croke Park. But yeah, I wasn't blown away by Ballyburn. I see the argument, and I completely get why they're going to the Brown advisory, but I didn't think Iparipas turned up at all, and I still think Croke Park might be a questionable stayer at the trip. Okay,
Ballyburn's 9-4 with bet 365 for the Brown advisory. Dancing City 7-2, Croke Park 10s, Django Bay 14s. How impressed were you with Ballyburn on the weekend?
Very, yeah. I mean, I don't get too sort of up on my high horse or offended by people who want to crib Ballyburn. They're entitled to do that. They've got their own opinions and you know, fair play and what have you. To my eyes, I've always been a big fan of his. I can't really sort of crib him at all, what he's done this season. The Kempton run, in hindsight, was probably the wrong move. But they wanted to see there and then, didn't they? Whether he's going to be an Arkle horse, whether rule that in or roll that out. Willie's all about Cheltenham and working backwards, isn't he? So a lot of those early season runs are sort of just early jousts, aren't they? Yeah. Just to see what he's got, and then he works his way through the season, unlike others who do it in different ways. So straight away he's like, okay, he's going to be a Brown Advisory horse. This race on Saturday was the natural progression, 2 mile 5, and he come through the test with flying colours. Croke Park, 3 for 3 prior to that was a good guide, and he saw him off. I thought he was very strong from the last. The further he went, the better he looked, which is a good sign for the 3 mile at Cheltenham. I'm not so concerned about his jumping.
I thought he jumped all right.
I thought he was. I watched him. I don't normally back odds on shots nowadays, and I did have a small bit on him Saturday because I thought I don't want to let him go. I thought he was just slightly overpriced at 4 to 5, 4 to 6, and I never had a moment's worry watching him. Sometimes it hots in your mouth when you're watching a horse. And he never made me flinch. I always thought he was in control of the situation. His time was good. It wasn't brilliant. He's run much faster over hurdles when he won the Brown Advisory, the Turners last year. That was a sensational number. Going forward, I think he's the classier horse, undoubtedly, between him and Dancing City. Dancing City would never win a Turners. He'd never win a 2 mile Grade 1. He's more of an out and out, dyed in the wall. Old-fashioned. He's like a synchronised, a Master Oats, a cool ground. He's like if it was
he'd be running in the National Hunt Chase if it hadn't
exactly.
changed the
Yeah. He's more of a. If the ground came up soft or heavy in a Gold Cup, he'd be the one that you'd have out of the two. Yeah. But on just genuine nice ground, I think Ballyburn would always have too much quality for Dancing City. In 2 to 1 place, 3 to 1. I still think Ballyburn's fair value. I thought he might have got tightened up even shorter after the weekend. I've got to be honest.
And of course, Ballyburn only went to Kempton because the programme changed in Ireland. That wasn't what they would ideally have wanted to do. And then he's gone to a track that didn't suit him, up against a horse who produced one of the best chasing debuts you could ever wish to see. So I think overall Ballyburn's season's gone okay. So he is the standard setter. But Dancing City is a very smart horse. Let's move on and talk about Kopek de Bordes, who his jumping in comparison to his debut was chalk and cheese, and I thought was one of the performances of the weekend.
Yeah, without doubt. Yeah, I think the 2 mile novice category out of all the novice categories has been the hardest one to sort of get your head around. Certainly from a time figure perspective, we haven't got anything doing over a 70, which is unheard of going into sort of after Christmas, other than Romeo Coolio. Romeo Coolio posted a good number when he beat his field at the Christmas festival. I actually backed him off the back of that, thinking, well, that's the standard. Where the rest going to come from? Kopek de Bordes had only done a modest time when he beat Cowabunga, so you think, well, he's got to improve out of all recognition, but he did. Now he's the daddy. Yeah. All of a sudden he's gone beyond Romeo Cooley on the data. He was just super strong all the way through. He was almost travelling at a different pace to everything else. A good horse, they weren't a stellar field. There were good horses in behind. They were flat to the boards. They were treading water, and yet he was just powering clear. It was a sight to behold. But imagine the stands were going crazy for all those odds-on backers. And now we know that his jumping frailties have been ironed out. It's going to take a lot of imagination to see him not winning a soft ground Supreme. The only thing that I would say that might count against him, and this is just things that I picked up as I was watching it and getting the vibes on the way down to the post. He was very jig-joggy. He was very on his toes in the approach. He looks as though he's a crowd-reactive horse. Whether they stick a hood on him or whatever at Cheltenham, I don't know. But it was quite a spicy crowd there over the weekend. But there was only 17,000 or whatever maximum. But it was going to be 50, 60,000 at Cheltenham. There's a lot more electricity there. That just could, with the flight over, all the different surroundings, that might just sort of like put a different dynamic on his performance. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there if you're thinking about taking a short price.
Well, he's 11 to 8 anti-post and 11 to 10 non-runner, no bet. So it's worth taking into account all variables when you're backing a horse like that.
I think he's a poor bet now. I think he's the right favourite. But if I'm going to back Kopek de Bordes, I'd be prepared to wait. Let's say he's even money, 5 to 4 on the day. I want to watch him go down to the post. I want to see how he is in the prelims, going down to the post, and then place my bet. I don't want to be backing him now. I'd rather sacrifice half a point, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, he's going to take a bit of beating. So my Romeo Coolio bet, I'm glad I backed him each way, put that way.
Well, what was interesting, I thought, Steve, was after he won on his debut, Willie Mullins talked about what sort of engine this horse must have to kick every hurdle out of the way and win the way he did. What did you think Willie Mullins felt about the performance on Saturday?
Right. It's hard not to be impressed with it. I mean, he was my best bet of the Dublin Racing Festival on the show last week.
Oh, yes, you did. That's correct.
At 15 to 8, and was strong in the market. And then, like Andy said, sweating the preliminaries, keen to post, keen in the early stages of the race. And you kind of thought, OK, you're going to have to be a good horse to win here. And then hampered by a loose horse 2 out and just went further and further clear. And it was such an impressive performance. And it will just be if he copes with it. You would say that he probably didn't cope with it at the Dublin Racing Festival and still managed to win, but he's going to be against better opposition in the Supreme in the opening race at the Cheltenham Festival. The one that caught my eye was Carnac, and that was his 5th run over hurdles. So whether they now look towards handicaps with him, he made quite a big sweeping move on the outside under Patrick Mullins. Yeah. So whatever mark he gets, I imagine he's going to be entered in some of those handicap hurdles will be interesting. But yeah, he's of the proper mould of Classical Dream and Appreciate It, who won this race before winning the Supreme.
And he was beaten 49 lengths by Romeo Coolio at the previous meeting. Yeah. So gives us a little bit of hope that that form is not too shabby.
There speaks of Romeo Coolio.
He made a horrendous error that day, didn't he?
He did, in all fairness, yeah.
The next race we'll talk about caused a little bit of consternation on the weekend. That was Solness, repeating the manner of his victory from Christmas time, beating Marine Nationale and Quilixios, Gaelic Warrior, a little bit disappointing again. But it was the ride again given to Solness. I think it was an RTE. There were lots of debate between the presenters about what the ride that Danny Mullins gave Solness and how others reacted to it. What was the view on the track on the day?
I had the in-running odds up as soon as they basically went for up past the stands, because the race kind of fell apart. I think Danny Mullins gave him a good ride. I didn't think it was a great ride. You had El Fabiolo falling at the second fence, which took out the 15 to 8 shot. I don't think Gaelic Warrior was ever going. I know he plugged on a bit in the closing stages, but halfway he was odds on in running and deservedly so.
And could anyone have reacted any differently? Riders, could they have put any more pressure on him?
I don't think so. I think Sean Flanagan probably rode Marine Nationale to finish as close as he possibly could. The one you'd look at and question the ride, and you might have been able to on the Atlantique as well in the Irish Arkle, was how much effort Paul Townend made to try and get closer. But Paul Townend seems a very feel rider. You often watch him on a horse and you can just tell the horse isn't going as is expecting it to. And if he gets out the persuader and gives him a couple of smacks, would that make any difference? No. And that's why he's riding the best horses for Willie Mullins.
If the other riders couldn't do anything about it, then we've got to be talking about Solness with a bit more enthusiasm for his Queen Mother Champion Chase chances, surely.
Remarkable horse, hasn't he? He's been campaigned very aggressively. I think that was his 8th run of the season, or 8th run since running in the Galway Plate or something like that. That victory at the Christmas seemed to give him and Connections and his jockey a huge amount of confidence in what he can do. We kind of dismissed that victory as, it was a bit of a flash in the pan, but from the word go, he put the rest of the sword. He went a good gallop. The data that we've got, the sectionals were on par with what he did before. The overall time was similar to what he did before, so we didn't really have to do anything different, really. He's such a wonderful jumper for but not very big horse as well. When you talk about sort of efficiency, goodness me, I mean, he doesn't waste any ground in the air at all. He's in and out and gone. Very, very nimble over his obstacles, and he never looks like falling either. He's a brilliant leaper. The ride with Gaelic Warrior, halfway down the back, it looks as though Paul Townend was going to pull him up. I think it was damage limitation. I actually thought he's half thought about pulling him up, and he just thought, no, I'm just going to give him a couple of fences just to fill him up a bit, and then let him come home, give him a bit of confidence. You don't want to go to Cheltenham off the back of a pull-up or an uncompletion. So I think he's just let him, like I say, come to himself. He knew the race was gone. That's why he was going further and further back. I just think he left him alone for about half a mile. And then he said, right, come on then, let's finish from the back of the second last. And he actually started to pick up nicely. Yeah. So in relation to Cheltenham, as Richie was interviewed afterwards, it wasn't an absolute complete disaster. And we know that Leopardstown's not necessarily his bag when he's walking in a two-runner race the year before behind Factor Fall. So that was really tragic. And then a month and a half later, Christ, it was as if you swapped the horse around, you know, put a new engine in him. So I wouldn't want to be writing off Galopin Warrior just yet. Cheltenham definitely seems to be a place where he comes a little bit more alive. So he's not quite busted flush yet, but I think at the same time we should be now paying a little bit more respect to Solness.
Well, with that in mind, when you talk about the market for the Champion Chase, and John Bond's 5-6 favourite, Gaelic Warrior's 5-1. Now, bearing in mind that Connections of Ile-France have said that if Factor Fall goes for the Ryanair, they'll go for the Queen Mother Champion Chase. And Ile-France can only go one way, especially in the Queen Mother Champion Chase. He's 13-2. El Fabiolo 10s, Energument 10s, Marine Nationale 11s, same price as Solness. But it would be fascinating to see Solness and Ile-France going.
And Matata.
And Matata as well at 40.
Yeah, that's a potential, I mean, John Bond will have the luxury of just sitting in behind, because sometimes he's had to make his own running.
Yeah.
I mean, Nicky Henderson.
Well, of course, John Bond, Solness was about, I don't know, was it 10, 12 lengths behind John Bond in the Tingle Creek as well?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But he may just be a different horse now. So
probably slightly better ground, I think, has helped him. I wouldn't think he'd want really bad conditions, Solness. Just quickly on that race as well before we move on. I thought actually Marine Nationale came of age in that race. Yeah. You could always question his finishing effort a little bit, and I think a lot will. You know, he always seems to be sort of gasping at the end. But if you do his circuit comparison with the winner and his circuit comparison with Gaelic Warrior, he actually came out the best of the lot by about half a second, or maybe getting close to a second. For where he jumped the first fence in comparison to Solness and where he was at the line, the proximity at the line, he's made up probably about 7 or 8 lengths on the winner. So I think,
with that in mind, has Sean Flanagan done anything wrong in trying to win the race?
No, not at all, no. Okay. I think he probably thought, well, he's going to come back to me, and he did, but he just wasn't quite. He was just a little bit too far back, but it wasn't a complete misjudgment or miscalculation. It was just it almost came off for him. But I think he's a player. Okay. If I was going to have a bet in the Champion Chase, and I probably want to see the full field and see where the France goes, but I'll be looking towards Marine Nationale each way. I think he's fairly solid.
Another race that's shaping up really well, the Champion Chase. The Irish Champion Hurdle, obviously billed as Lossiemouth versus Stateman. Lossiemouth took a horrid fall. Thankfully, both her and Danny Mullins were up okay. You were saying when she fell earlier on, you know, the concern was for her, for Danny Mullins. But what did you make of Stateman's performance, and did you think that there was anything in it, any merit in it to go, well, yeah, he's still a viable Champion Hurdle contender?
So I'd backed him on the day, and as I went past the stands the first time, I looked very closely at Paul's body language to see how he was going. He was going a lot better than what he was at Christmas, which obviously was a huge positive. And then after Lossiemouth departed, a couple of my friends who aren't the biggest horse racing fans kind of went, oh God, he's going to get caught. I was like, don't worry about it, he never wins by that far. I didn't expect bookmakers to cut him after that, if I'm being honest. And then they cut him again after that, which I thought was a bit surprising because all he did was reverse form with Winter Fog, I suppose. But I don't think that improved his chances at the Cheltenham Festival at all. I was with Stateman because of Leopardstown. I'm still not convinced that Cheltenham's really Stateman's track. And it's all going to be down on prices on the day, but I'd still give Lossiemouth a big chance in a Champion Hurdle if it was me.
4-6, Constitution Hill at Bet365, Lossiemouth 5, Stateman 11-2, Brighter Days Ahead 6-1. What did you think of that race, and what do you think of Stateman as a Champion Hurdle contender?
Well, I mentioned this when I did a show with Johnny Ward last week when we were looking towards the Dublin Racing Festival. I think it's always been very interesting that the sort of vibes around Stateman throughout the season. I've been a big fan of Andesam, and I know he's out for the season now, unfortunately. But I thought it was very, very interesting to note that he wasn't going to go for the champion anyway, even though he won impressively the day. I thought, oh, you know, he's the new kid on the block here, and straight away, no, we're not. He's not a champion hurdle contender. Based on, I think they still thought Stateman, he's our number one. You know, we're not entertaining Andesam just yet. I know that Andesam subsequently picked up the injury, but I thought that comment afterwards was more of a thumbs up towards Stateman and the fact that don't worry, we'll get him there at Cheltenham. He's not the back number that everyone else is thinking, because he just never took part, did he, against Brighter Days Ahead? But he looked a lot more engaged over the weekend when he was upsides, Lossy Mouth. He was still in the balance. Would have been a great race between the two, I'm sure, all the way down to the last. But yeah, he's definitely he's a contender in the Champion Hurdle. I don't think he'll beat an on-song Constitution Hill, but I could see why bookmakers are protecting any potential each-way liabilities on a horse like that, because he's definitely going to run, whereas we don't know whether Lossy Mouth or particular Brighter Days Ahead don't. If one of them comes out, all of a sudden you think, well, Stateman will be in every single each-way multiple going, wouldn't he? And if you start sticking 10-1 up for him, all of a sudden you're on a winner, aren't you, with Stateman? So I think they've gone 5s 11-2. So it kind of like stops the each-way thieves, doesn't it, in some respects? Yeah. I think that's all they've done there.
Okay. Lossy Mouth Connections were talking about her before the race, saying they wanted to sharpen her up ahead of a Champion Hurdle tilt, because obviously at Kempton behind Constitution Hill. I was slightly surprised how hard she went in the early part of the race. Was anybody else?
Yeah, I think Willie Mullins was as well, but the interview afterwards.
I didn't quite get. I mean, I get that you wanted to be sharper and be more prominent, because you probably don't want to sit as far back as you did at Kempton, and you want to sit with as close as you can to Constitution. But I was surprised at how far she was going in the early part of the race.
I enjoyed it though.
Yeah,
no, it's great.
Yeah, great. I never really get, and I don't think any of us know what the game plan is going to be with half those Mullins horses. And they interviewed Rishi beforehand, and he's gone over to, having left the interview, almost saying, I don't know, I'm just going to find out. I'm thinking, well, surely they'd have a game plan like 2-3 days in advance. They know exactly what they're going to do. You know, it's like Arnie Slot turns up on the day and says, right, okay, we're playing Forest today. What are we going to do? You know, they've done all the work before, haven't they? They know who's going to be marking who, what setup they're going to be doing, and yeah, it's just really odd. So it doesn't surprise me that there was such a shock how quick Danny Mullins went off.
Yeah, it was. Anything else from the weekend that you want to mention?
Just training-wise, Gavin Cromwell and Emmett Mullins obviously both had a good weekend. I was quite taken by Bambino Fever in the Grade 2, the Mayor's Bumper. She's going to head to the Champion Bumper now. She's 5-1, no run and no bet. With that, that's just Jodie Townend's race, isn't it? I think second win in the last 4 years. I was quite taken with that, and yeah, I didn't have a huge eye on the UK form. Yeah. Obviously, handstands beating Django Bay. I thought fair and square, to be honest. I saw Nico got a couple of pelters for his ride, but I didn't think he did anything wrong with that, and I just thought handstands found a lot at the finish.
Any others that you want to mention?
Yeah, handstand was really good figure, right up there with the best that we got over the weekend. Then we got 74 on our date rating. We awarded him that figure in comparison to 72 Ballyburn, so it was right up there with sort of Ballyburn. The section, all the back end circuit time was 4 seconds quicker than Gunsight Ridge. Okay. And that was obviously 2 more handicaps, so that's usually a good guide. Don't think he's going to go to Cheltenham. I think he's always the plan is always to go to Aintree or Punchestown with him, which I think is a wise move. But he's been great for the Pauline team, which is a Philip obviously having to deal with not having the jukebox man for the rest of the season. Couple more from the DRF. I was really impressed, like Steve, with Bambino Fever. Yeah, they went a real good gallop in that, because I set them off from the first in the back straight, all hurdle races, and the 2 bumpers obviously when they go through the wings, and she was 5 seconds quicker than Kopek de Borg from that point to the winning line. Now obviously you have to take off, I think it's four seconds for the hurdles being taken out, but she still beat Kopek de Bordes pretty easily, just based on that circuit sectional. So I think she's very, very good. It'll take a good horse to beat her at Cheltenham. I haven't seen a better bumper winner than her.
No.
And the other big eye catcher for me was McClory.
Yep.
Steve's touched upon the 2 Mullins winners, but I think he's a talent, that McClory. He got beat by Tap on the Go at Tipperary early on the season. I thought that was a good race. That was a good race on our data. And I liked the way he ran that day. And I've had him down as a sort of handicap project from that downwards. I wasn't quite sure with his ride behind James's Gate at Punchestown a couple of runs back. They dropped him back from 2.5 miles to 2 miles at Limerick. I thought that might be a bit sharp for him around there. And he won despite dropping back. Yeah. And I think he won despite the trip again over the weekend. But I just think he's a really good horse. But I do think he's going to be better when he stepped up to 2.5, because I can't see, for instance, argument's sake, a race like the County Hurdle really suiting him against the genuine UK 2-milers. But I think a more slightly mundane, tepid gallop in a 2.5, and coming from JP McManus, the Martin Pipe, a race that JP likes to win. He reminds me of Waterford Whispers last year. That kind of horse that's worked its way through the ranks, running at Leopardstown, running at the slightly semi-smaller tracks, and getting his mark to a point where he's quite well handicapped. He was 120 before the weekend, which wouldn't have been good enough to get into Cheltenham. So he needed to punch a big hole in that. That's why I think he was, ridden the way he was to win it. He now got 131 or 132, which should be fine for the Martin Pipe. He's one of my few potential at this very moment handicap projects for Cheltenham. Okay. Yeah.
So a couple to mention there, obviously, Bambino Fever and McClory. Handstands, that was my tickle from last week, so happy giggling away on that. My favourite quote of the weekend came from his owner, Tim Radford, who's had a fair few good horses. He had Racing Demon, and he had Summersby and others. But he said after the race, he said people sometimes don't realise just how, because he was very tearful, he's very emotional. He said, don't realise just how many frogs we have to kiss to find a horse like Handstands. It's my favourite quote of the week, and I think you're right, he's going to miss Cheltenham, but he's going to head to Aintree. And I thought he's just getting better with every start. I think his jumping holds up under pressure, and he was very strong at the end. I think Django Bay ran really well, but I think they're 2 very good horses. Yeah. And I'm absolutely desperately unlucky, I think. Afforded, I thought we were home and hosed when he jumped the last in the Scottish County Hurdle, but Welsh Charger just did him. Good racing last weekend, and understandably, we spent a fair bit of time talking about the Dublin Racing Festival, but that's because it was high quality and it will have a huge bearing coming up at the Cheltenham Festival. Now, before we get into our weekend preview, just to let you know that our sponsor Bet365 have a best odds guaranteed offer. It's available on every single UK and Irish race from 8 a.m. on the day of the race. If you take a price and the SP is bigger, Bet365 will pay you at the bigger odds. Full T's and C's can be found on the website. You happy to press on with the... Yeah? No. Okay, great. And now we move on to our look ahead to this weekend, and most of the attention will be focused on Newbury. There's also a decent card as well at Warwick. But the Denman Chase, and this morning, Andy and I were talking about the Denman Chase and its place in the calendar as a trial for the Gold Cup. And then we've just had the Dublin Racing Festival. We've just gone on about the Irish Gold Cup and Factor File and Galopin Des Champs, etc., and spoken about that for about half an hour. And then you're talking about the Denman Chase, which has got, Brave Man's Game, Jello, Garlaw, Hitman, Future. I mean, let's talk about the race.
Well, they're all 50 to 1 bar, aren't they? In the 50 to 1 bar category for the Gold Cup, which pretty much tells you all need to know. I mean, they're dropping like flies, aren't they? So we need a few UK-based horses to at least stick their head above the parapet. You'd think, well, if Jello runs in this and he doesn't go back to 2 miles, at least they're half giving him a sight over 3 miles. I don't know. I mean, it's a chance worth taking. I mean, it's a decent race in its own right, and the prize money's there. So let's forget about Cheltenham for him.
Forget about that,
for argument's sake. But you get where I'm coming from. It's definitely worth a shot, particularly as Brave Man's Game's probably not the horse he was a couple of seasons ago. I think that's fair enough to say. He's had plenty of chances to correct or right the wrongs. I mean, he hasn't run badly this season. He's run at the Charlie Hall as perfectly respectable. The Betfair Chase, again, okay. But, you know, he's got well found out in the King George. And they've tried all kinds of stuff with him, you know, breathing ups, different tinkering around with tongue ties and all this kind of stuff, at cheek pieces and everything. So I think he's quite a vulnerable favourite. But what you take him on with, when you're looking at maybe, even me, looking at someone like Hitman, who always runs his race but never wins as a possible bet, you think you almost have to give your head a bit of a wobble, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, Brave Man's Game is a 2-to-1 favourite. Jello 3-to-1, obviously with Bet365. Hitman 5s, Lepatron 13-2, Fugitive 7s, Garlaw 7s, Eldorado Allen 9s, and Sam Brown 10s. And I think Eldorado Allen and Fugitive are both entered elsewhere. How do you play this race?
I don't know. It's an interesting betting heat. I respect anyone to have a strong opinion in it. I'd want to be taking on Brave Man's Game, to be honest. Fugitive, I'd have a question mark around the trip if they were to come here.
Same.
I've never seen him as a 3-miler. I think he's tried it once and pulled up at Aintree when trying it. Giello obviously has the option of the Game Spirit over 2 miles. I imagine they'll come here instead. I'd chance Hitman as well. I know he's 4 from 25 in his career, and some of those finishing efforts obviously are slightly questionable. But he's got really good form at Newbury, and particularly in this race. If you look at it, he won a 3-runner Novice Chase here. He finished 3rd in the Game Spirit over a trip that we now know is inadequate. Finished 2nd to a course specialist in Zanzibar in this a couple of years ago, and then finished 2nd to Shiskin in it. So the form of those is probably going to be good enough to win this. Now, Harry Cobden appears to have chosen Brave Man's Game because Freddie Ginger is now dropped up on the BHA site for Hitman instead. But that's no negative for me. And the fact that you can back him, what is he, 5-to-1 each way, 2 places?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be the bet here.
I think so. That'd be the way I was looking. I mean, those defeats, and you think, oh, he's a bit of a twicer, but he's been up against strong stayers that love Newbury. You can't call at the moment Brave Man's Game a real strong stayer the way he's finished up, particularly Jello. We don't know anything about the trip, so he might almost win by default here.
Yeah.
Well, I thought he would win last time out. Between the second to last and the last, I thought, yes, here we go. Finally, Hitman's going to get his head in front. And then he's out-jumped at the last, and he doesn't really finish the race off strongly. That's the only problem. But you've both highlighted that about him, that there are times where he just doesn't quite hit the line.
You'd be surprised if 2 went past him, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
That's it. I was about to say, he's likely to be there going down to the last.
He'll give you a good spin, put it this way, at that price.
Yeah. But it's not a race that you want to get too excited about in terms of having a bet. The Game Spirit Chase, again, similarly, might be one to watch for me. Sugino is the 4-to-7 favourite. Edward Stone 6-to-1, Liberty Hunter 6-to-1, Matata 6-to-1, JPR 1 16-to-1, Master Chewy 16s. I mean, Jello's in there at 20s. Sugino, just watch and enjoy.
Yeah, he should win this. Obviously, Nicky Henderson won this with Sprinter Sacra and Altior, both as novices. Likes Newbury as a track, doesn't he? Big, wide, open spaces, plenty for him to be able to jump. This was the race last year that they changed tactics with Edwardstone and kind of made all out of the blue. But you can't imagine Matata or Sugino will let him get too far ahead if they were going to try and do that. They usually creep away on Liberty Hunter.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably going to be good tactics for this race. And now, Harry Cobden's obviously going to be at the meeting to ride Brave Man's Game. He's not jocked up currently, which would make you slightly question if he's going to run in this. But the way that he's ridden is going to be interesting with regards to the Cheltenham Festival, because he could be one to be running on at the finish in a champion chase, which is currently 33-1 with Bet365 for. Or they could go for the Grand Annual that he ran really well in last year, that is the 8-1 favourite. Now, if I knew that he was going to be ridden to obtain his best possible position in this race, he'd definitely be the one for forecast purposes with Sugino. But I do just have the back of my head currently on if he's a questionable runner and whether they will be keeping an eye on his handicap mark and not trying to finish too close to Sugino.
Don't you just have to wait to see whether they punt him off the boards and then wait for an interview where no one pretends they have got a clue where it's coming from.
But as a horse, I really like him, and I do think the setup of this race could work perfectly for him. But whether they want to finish too close to Sugino is another question.
How do you see it?
Yeah, it's fun. I'm never been an odds-on punter. When I look at races like this, my column's always based on trying to find value. So I've never been one to sort of fly flag of, we've got to be back in the 4-to-7 favourite here. But I'm coming to the conclusion, actually, I'm missing a hell of a lot of obvious winning bets here along the way. I looked at the Dublin Racing Festival, I previewed it last week. Yeah, Marsbury, yeah, that looks a good bet, that'll win. Won. Kopek Des Champs, yeah, that won. Galopin Des Champs, yeah, that won. Everything that you thought was a genuine, decent, good, solid odds-on shot. And it wasn't like 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4. Yeah. You know, they were backable, weren't they? They weren't ridiculously short prices. And you could have made a nice little profit by backing all those and stayed away from the handicaps and won a few quid. And I've certainly seen worse 4 to 7 chances here.
Because I haven't had a chance to speak to you about it, but the debut he made over Fences at Kempton, how did you rate that historically?
Yeah, based on our data, that's as good as we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years. It was a 77, which I think Galopin Des Champs when he won. I think it was his second race at Leopardstown. We got him doing an 80 back in the day, and that's the quickest.
Yes, I remember that.
That was the quickest ever novice chase we had. So 77 on his debut. You can't crib that. So he's already run to an Arkle winning performance. He's won the Arkle off that. But then Marge was gone and literally done something very similar. So like I say, I don't think that's totally a foregone conclusion.
All right.
But yeah, I do think he'll win Saturday.
The Newbury Handicap Hurdle, the big handicap hurdle of the weekend, sees the Nicky Henderson Joyous 5-1 favourite. Secret Squirrel, joint favourite, 5-1 with Joyous. Navajo Indy, 9-1. Favour and Fortune, 10s. Fiercely Proud, 10s. Tell Her the Name, 10s. Hansard, 12s. Beat the Bat, 14s. Washington. Last year's winner, Iberico Lord, 16s. What do you fancy here?
I put up Navajo Indy on my column about 2-3 weeks ago. I was actually doing a weekly dossier of weekend performances, and the lad said if there's an anti-post bet for Cheltenham, then go ahead and find something. I've put a few anti-post bets for Cheltenham, and I didn't have one that particular week, so it's quite a quiet week with regard to Cheltenham bets. But I did say to them, I think I've got an anti-post bet off the back of Windsor's card for Newbury. Is that okay if I do that? And they say, yeah, crack on. So I've gone with Navajo Indy based on that run behind Secret Squirrel
at Windsor.
At Windsor, I thought it was an extraordinary run straight ride. It was almost as if they'd gone out and used that race at Windsor as a prep, because at Newbury, when he won the Jerry Field and he was always in second and third, he was always handy, he was always travelling nicely, and he was alive. But at Windsor, he kind of was lethargic out the gate. He went into the first bend, he was last down the back straight, he was last turning for home. I thought, Christ,
this attached over on the left in the straight.
Yeah, I backed him this start. I think this is embarrassing. He's going to be tailed off, and all of a sudden, he went across the intersection and he went up the inside. I thought, Christ, he's picking up. He took off on the run. He ended up finishing 4th, and luckily got money back. But I thought it was a real eye-catching run. But his record at Newbury is really good. He's won twice and finished second there in 3 runs. So I think the nature of Newbury, the more galloping circuit suits him. The one thing that might count against him come the weekend, and I was hoping for more rain, is the ground. It's soft at the moment. I think that if they ran the race today on genuine soft ground, he'd almost win. But that forecast for the rest of the week is a little bit of rain here, then everywhere. That might just kind of keep it as it is. But I think it might just dry out and be not quite in his favour. But I've tipped him anti-post, so I'm going to have to stick with him. Okay.
I'm going to ask you about another horse in that race. So you might do it now. What did you make of Hansard's run in that race at Windsor?
Yeah, much better from him. Similar to a lot of the more horses, just not quite at it probably 2-3 weeks ago, but they're just the green shoots of recovery, to use that phrase, are starting, aren't they, with that yard? I think Gary Moore's gone on record to saying that it's a shame for Joss that he's joined the sort of sinking ship this year, as it were. But I think they'll have a good spring, and given the way that Goshen ran over the weekend,
my goodness,
if he's run as well as he did, then a horse like Hansard, who's got plenty of back class, he's a player.
I thought he would be of interest in this race. What did you fancy, Steve?
I quite like a similar form line to Andy from the Jerry Field, and the horse that I quite like is Our Champ. Now, it's interesting to go and watch it back. So in that race, there was 3 that actually pushed the pace, and then Navajo Indy was kind of the leader of the next pack in behind. Now, if you look at where they finished that day, the 3 that were in the lead, Bally finished last by 52 lengths, Excelero finished 9th, beaten 14.5 lengths, and then you had Our Champ, who stayed on to finish 3rd that day. So he pushed 2 forceful a pace that day and managed to stay in there at the finish. He then did exactly the same at Ascot the next time. It was him, Steel Ally and Secret Squirrel went off like the clappers in the lead again. And Steel Ally pulled up. Secret Squirrel was still ahead of Our Champ at that time when he fell. But Our Champ again stayed on well, finished 5th that day. Now, I don't really know why they've ridden him like that on the last 2 starts, because the time before that when he won at Ascot, he sat prominently for the majority of the race, settled okay, and it's not as if he's an undersow needs to be in the lead during his races. So I just thought if they give him a less forceful ride in this, Rex Dingle's actually jocked up on him. So change of rider, and yeah, he's 25 to 1 with Bet365. I thought that was quite a big price on his return to Newbury.
It just goes to show as well that the sort of kamikaze nature of the 3 horses that Steve's touched upon there. Yeah. I didn't think David Bass needed to get involved in that little skirmish for the lead. He could have just got in behind Steel Alley and Our Champ and read the room a little bit, thinking, okay, I want to be prominent to Secret Squirrel, but I'm just going to take a lead in behind there, like Fiercely Proud did, who sat 4th or 5th just off it. And they can't. And the first 2 home that day, they were 4th and 5th in that little pocket in behind them. I think David Bass was way too aggressive. I think if he had a chance of riding that race again, he wouldn't have done what he did. It ultimately counted against Secret Squirrel. And as we saw, with a much more conservative rider at Windsor, with the jockey change that Cobden rode him that day, he was much more the finish article. So yeah, I think Secret Squirrel, based on his Windsor run, he's probably the right favourite.
Yeah. I also give a mention of Favour and Fortune, who I thought ran like the race was needed at Ascot.
Yeah,
just didn't run as well as I wanted to, but looked rusty. Came there, wasn't that far off the leaders turning in, and then they got away from him. But I wouldn't give up on him just yet. He's 10 to 1.
Better ground to suit him.
Better ground will suit him. Favour and Fortune and Hansard were the 2 that I was prepared to have a play at. Anything else running this weekend? I mean, the Kingmaker is going to be the last chance for Lerdesud to strut his stuff as an Arkle hope, but he's got Sergino and Mashborough.
And he's going to be a changed man. He's going to be putting 2 odds on favourites.
Yeah, that's it. That's mainly about the weekend. A lumpy short price double. Yeah, up in my column, 5-point win nap double. I mean, it's good in some respects for Lerdesud, because he's just going to have a little bit of a freebie, a little bit of a blowout for a nice pot, but it's a shame in some respects he's not going to get tested, and we're not going to really learn anything. He's going to go into Cheltenham not having an all guns out kind of fight, which is good or bad in equal measure, depending on which side of the fence you sit. The Skeltons probably don't want a hard race, but they want to run. And
I guess the good thing about him is that he had some tough races as a hurdler in hand, and you know that he can handle them.
God, yeah.
So, yeah, it'd be nice to know just where he's at in comparison to the other 2, the 2 big.
I think I wouldn't say he's some way off it, but he'd be I think the market has got him about peg right.
Which is 14 to 1 in comparison, which is understandable.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, there's just a couple of interesting entries. Regent Stroll has entered in the opening novice handicap hurdle, not handicap hurdle, in the novice hurdle. Back down to 2 miles, obviously ran below form in the Challow. Connections of Haiti Kalur are obviously happy with a mark of 135 for the National Hunt Chase, because he goes back over hurdles at the weekend as a prep for that. So that would, make you look twice at backing him for the National Hunt Chase. So he's 6 to 1 with Bet365 for that race. They're obviously happy with that as a no profile for that race. And then an interesting entry is Jericho de Repene is in a Temps qualifier at Exeter on Sunday.
Yes.
I didn't see that at the start of the year.
And he's also at Warwick on Saturday. I'd like to know which race he's going to run in. Because, of course, he beat Secret Squirrel at Newbury last year off level weights. Secret Squirrel is now, 131, is he?
131, for 126,
Jericho de Repene, things went awry over fences at Sandown, and then he was given a nice comeback, I thought. It was nice enough.
Yeah.
And also ran like a step up in trip would suit him.
He did.
So
he did.
I'm not sure what race he is going to run in, because he was potentially going to be if he ran in the Warwick race, I'd be very keen on him. But any others that we want to mention for the?
Yeah, I mean, are we doing a nap for the weekend at the end of this?
In a second.
I won't mention that then.
Save the nap.
Okay, there's one more horse. We mentioned Dan Skelton, of course, and I think you've always got to factor him in when it comes to races at Warwick, his local track, particularly on a high-profile Saturday. Lemilos is an interesting runner.
Yeah,
I think he runs in the. He's at the Veterans Chase.
He's in the Veterans. He's 9 to 2 with Bet365 for the Veterans at Warwick on Saturday.
Yeah, this is classic Skelton. They went quite hard with him the run before, didn't they, at Newbury? They really drilled him from the front, and he ran really well. But I think that was an overly aggressive ride. And then the fog descended at Chepstow. It was a great meeting for trainers that didn't really want to show their hand because we couldn't see what was going on at half the time. And the Milos, I noticed, tootled on to finish third behind a good horse of Philip Hobbs and what Johnson White's called Lowry's Bar. Now, Lowry's Bar had pushed Jaguar very close at Bangor on his chasing debut. He did really well to win at Exeter. He won again at Chepstow. I think he's a good horse, Lowry's Bar. I think he could be one for the Novices handicap at the Cheltenham Festival. And Lamilos was third to him. And lo and behold, the handicappers dropped Lamilos from 146 to 139. He's actually under the 140 threshold.
It's a miracle.
Unbelievable. For finishing third, would you believe it? Over an adequate trip. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see the betting patterns for Lamilos come the weekend.
Excellent. I think that's it. So stand by because Andy's already teased it. Coming up very shortly, our best bets of the weekend. But before we get into that, just to let you know of a free-to-play 6 horses challenge. It's available every weekend with free spins on offer if you get 2 or 3 selections correct. Prize pools available for 5 and 4 correct predictions, as well as a jackpot for all 6. As usual, the T's and C's apply. So here we go with our best bets of the weekend coming up, and Andy Holding is first.
Thank you, Richie. Yes, I'm always reluctant to sort of mention something on a Tuesday, really, regards a nap on a Saturday, because obviously it might punch a hole in the price for my column on the weekend. I might put him up in the end because I'm not sure what price he will be, but there's a lovely horse of Laura Morgan's. Been following him all season, just monitoring his progress. A horse called Kepler's Law.
I'm writing it in now. Bolted up at Leicester.
I think this is a star in the making. I really do. I think he could be better than their good horse over fences in time. Not until May.
Not long till May.
Not long till May. The horse that
sadly
no longer with us. I think he could be better than him. He ran behind the good horse of John Joe's first time out at Aintree. Mr. Megget, and we got that as a good time figure, and he ran well to finish third that day. He kicked everything out of the ground. He's very novice, he's very green, just got a bit tired. They then ran him against that horse of Jenny Candlish's that flies from the front,
Skyjack
Hijack, and again he jumped a bit novice-y, but they took him to Leicester the other day, slower ground, much more easy pace, allowed him to get himself into the race, and he absolutely bolted up. His circuit time was brilliant. He was like 5-6 seconds quicker than anything else, and he won apologising. I mean, he was so full of running at the line, it was ridiculous. I thought, Christ, that is a fair weapon. He just looked as though, in conjunction with the yard, that he's all of a sudden come to hand.
I think they spoke very effusively about him after the race.
Yeah,
as well. It's on Racing TV. I'm pretty certain I saw an interview where they were basically saying this is the next good horse they've got.
Yeah, I really rate him. I wouldn't say he's got away with daylight robbery. 128's fairly, sternish enough, but I actually think the handicappers copped onto him as well. I don't think he's a million miles away. I think he's still south of where he'll end up. Yeah. Because I think this is a 150 horse in time over fences. And incidentally, the reason I've kind of followed his progress, I happened to do his point-to-point data.
Oh, okay.
I was doing it from a bloodstock agent friend of mine last year, and Kepler's Law was one of the ones that I did. And I mentioned it to the guy. I said, "You think he's okay?" So since he's come over, I've really monitored how he's gone. He was actually 50-1 on his debut behind Mr. Megget, and I didn't back him. I thought, God, if he had a one at 50s, I hadn't backed him, I'd have been sick. But I won't miss him on Saturday if he's the right price. I think he's a smart horse.
Yeah, that's the 2 mile 5 handicap hurdle.
Yeah, Kepler's
Warwick on the weekend. Steve,
I'm going to go to Newbury for that handicap hurdle. I just think our champ under a better ride this weekend can definitely finish a lot closer at Newbury if ridden with more restraint.
Okay,
he's 25-1.
Our champ in the Newbury handicap hurdle. Well, Steve mentioned a horse I'm particularly interested in, Jericho Arepine, but he's entered in the race that Andy's put up, Kepler's Law. Wherever he runs, if he runs at Exeter or indeed at Warwick, I'd be interested to see how he gets on, because I can't give up on him after what he's done so far, and was much better. But unfortunately, he couldn't, because I'm not sure where he's going to run. And Nicky Henderson's also got Impostoire in the same Kepler's Law race. I'm hoping that Gallo Marceau comes for the Mares, Warwick Mares Hurdle. If she does, I think she's 6-4 with Bet365, which I thought was a good price. I mean, I think that comparison to West Balboa, who's 2-1, You Wear It Well, who I just don't think has been the same horse. Dame of the Cotswolds, who's 8-1. Royal Mark. I mean, I think if she turns up, even if she's the horse that ran last time, I think she'd be good enough to win this race. But I think she's going to improve for that anyway. So I thought Gala Marceau was a pretty solid bet, 6-4 with Bet365 for the Warwick Mares Hurdle on the weekend. But I'll be keeping an eye on Jericho wherever he goes. And that is it for this episode of Racing Weekly. Andy, you out and about this weekend? You going racing at all?
No, I'm not. I'm actually playing golf.
Oh, are you?
I'm dusting off the golf clubs. Got my father-in-law coming down, and he likes a round. He's 80 as well, but
tremendous.
He can still play. I'm telling you, I won't want to be giving him too many shots. But this way, he's one of those players that he's not particularly long off the tee, but he's deadly around the green. I always think I've got him, and then he chips it within 4 foot, knocks it in. I'm scrambling around. So yeah, that'd be quite fun. But I should definitely be watching the race on Saturday and then the golf on the Sunday.
Excellent. Well, the fact that you're talking about playing with your father who's 80, so that is my ambition. If I make it to 80, I mean, I don't know if I will, but if I do, I'll still want to be playing golf. Are you out and about, not golfing?
Not golfing. I might probably head to Huntingdon on Thursday, the Sydney Banks card. That looks good.
Handstands, Django Bay?
Yeah, Jax Jr. will be good for Lucy Wadham. She also got telepathique in that Mares Chase against Brides Hill. So, yeah, really good day for one of my local tracks.
Yeah, there's a good bumper on the weekend as well. There's Sober Glory, and I'm trying to remember the other horse off the top of my head who won really well the other day. But watch out for that bumper later in the week. I think it's at Newbury. It should be a cracking race. I'm hoping, where am I going? I'm hoping to get out and about this weekend at the races. I'm also hoping to play golf, but I don't think anybody else cares about that too much. Thank you very much, though, to Steve and Andy for being part of this week's show on Racing Weekly. Thank you for watching as well. As usual, if you've got any comments, you know the drill, in the comment section on YouTube, the review on Apple Podcasts. Next week, Richard Hoyles is going to join us. We'll be talking about the Ascot Chase and the Kingwell Hurdle. But for now, from Steve, Andy and myself, bye-bye.